is great to be here, and what can I say? With that introduction, Apostolos, and everyone has said, the light up here, I should be using my sunglasses. You may have heard from the accent, I'm from California, but I've been traveling a lot as of late, and again, just so inspired by our colleagues. I think we're all here learning from our various colleagues. There you go. I tend to walk around quite a bit, but again, thank you all, Efaristo Parapoli. Again, just a quick overview, and there's a few things to be mindful of your time. I'm really looking forward to our discussion. I'm learning a lot from our colleagues from all over the world, but to our local hosts on Lesvos, and to the most inspiring folks that we've met, from the colleagues that I've met that are from Afghanistan, to those that traveled from Myanmar. I've been so impressed by the young people that I think we're going to talk, and as I always say, beware of experts, beware of consultants, and I've been an erstwhile consultant for a while. I think co-creation and learning and being inspired by Apostolos and again, Vasily and his passion for the idea that we do have a challenge here. And of course, I may have given away my political affiliation, having worked on the Kerry-Obama campaigns. I'm going to actually have two Clinton quotes, one from our Secretary of State, one from, again, our former president. But it takes a village, I did steal from Hillary Clinton. And this idea that we will all do this is the idea. And of course, I'm going to crane my neck to look at this. But that's some of the background. And again, it's been a busy couple of years. But what I think I'll do, and again, our UNHCR colleague, he did such a great job of looking at the trajectory of this thing called crisis mapping. And I was so impressed to hear that we've got colleagues here from the University of Agder. And again, really the work does start on Monday, as Apostolos had said, that we will then work together to look at solutions that I think this is such a great group, from technology to the humanities to religion to faith, some amazing in-depth modeling that's both tactical to strategic, but those are some context. You can see up there, again, I've worked with the UN in different capacities, North America. As I said, I'm from California, but my family were refugees for quite a long time. My Norwegian family was run out of Ethiopia back in the 30s. Got to Norway, and then were occupied there. My dad left after the war, and like all good immigrants, went to California, worked in the fields, got a degree, worked on the space program. I'll talk more later beyond technology that immigrants, to be frank, and migrants and refugees, from our lessons learned in California, they are the future. We should welcome them and say thank you for choosing us. Most of the companies in Silicon Valley, to be frank, are founded by immigrants and refugees. So that is the fact, and that's where we should be very thankful. But a quick overview, I'm going to give an overview of what we call crisis mapping. In the fall of '09, I was involved in the response to what was in the pandemic. We did not know how big it would get. We needed the folks modeling to get there. This is a busy slide, and of course I'll be mindful of your time. But again, we were in the middle of the pandemic, and we were trying out new solutions at WHO. Then when Haiti hit, I had just gotten on Twitter. Of course, I'm kind of wishing there was one individual in Washington, D.C. that was not on Twitter, but we'll leave that for later. I got on Twitter right when the earthquake hit. I was on about a week before when that hit. And the Haiti response was emblematic of how all parties needed to be involved. The critique that was given, that we really need to critique NGOs for their sometimes lack of coordination, the idea of branding, and also not sharing data. We all have altruistic and non-altruistic motives, and I think some of the dialogue here about the idea that somewhere, and it's so timely to be here in Greece, between Athens and Sparta, we really have to learn from this trajectory. But again, this was some of the history back of recent crisis mapping, and of course modeling and other things have come a long way since even before that. But again, that was some lessons learned from there. What I also saw was the idea that systems tend to get overloaded, and the most important part of systems, beyond computers, and again, I'm an old graying GIS guy, the computers and the data will come and go, but it's good people. And when we needed people, we would use what we call volunteer technical communities. And I really want everyone, you may be looking at your phone. I thank you all for actually being here on a Saturday. Please use your phones. Take a look at Disaster Relief 2.0. It's a great tome out of Harvard, the Humanitarian Initiative. I got to work with Jennifer Chan, who co-wrote it. She was our NetHope Ebola manager. John Crowley now leads IFRC's digital efforts, and they did something really unique I'll talk about later, opening up the pipeline of Facebook data, where we could use that anonymously and look at semantic analyses of that, and the Twitter pipeline, which is very helpful. So that was then. You also saw what we call Andre Verdi from UNOCHA, saw in the middle. Sometimes you do have a crisis and you share data, and then we had a crisis of what he called red dot fever. You pile up all your data, and then you've got just the entirety of Port-au-Prince covered in red dots. So again, somewhere you do need actual intelligence. You need to also be mindful of local languages and customs and the diaspora, of course. So that's just some of the background of what happened there. And I'm also really glad to see that this is, of course, a PDF and that it's working fine. I also have a role with the mass gathering group at WHO, and we're seeing that from the Arab Spring to the Olympics to, we noticed that what happened here at the peak was an ad hoc mass gathering, and we have challenges of disease spread and other things that we need to counter, and we can model these things. So that's where we will learn a lot from our Agder and other colleagues. But this is how we use these technologies. In fact, Answer is a Norwegian company that gave us a mobile app, was able to streamline data. And of course, that's, it's a very nerdy thing. And of course, technology can either be appropriate or sometimes overwhelming. But again, it's amazing when you take all those mobile data points and then you put in satellite imaging, and now we have a UAV revolution. And of course, I'll talk about the teeter-totter of appropriate and sometimes inappropriate technology. But UAVs can be used for IDP and displaced persons, monitoring of camps and other things that can really help to analyze and better serve. Again, I almost don't like using the term refugees or immigrants, or say our clients. If you treat them as your clients and how to serve their needs and understand them, and what we do here, listen, I think that's a good thing. So it's going back to 2012. And I think this is not where I did the quote, but as we say, never let a crisis go to waste. Ebola, I was called to WHO by colleagues. I tend to work in a lot of big, what we call operation centers. I joke that they tend to be buildings that make decisions, but they have no windows, and they tend to need all the information. We have them in LA with 10 million people, and California with 40. But then what we often have is this idea that we need operation centers to get data, and WHO was very ill prepared for Ebola. They knew that. They're not quite operational in that sense, and they did look to WFP, to UNICEF, to OCHA. But just one thing that we did, I think these lessons learned can come over to when I've heard that we need better connectivity in the different locations here. This was what we were doing, building out connectivity. As I always say it, if you are countering hemorrhagic fever or some other disease, and you can send in good supplies and send in smart doctors, if they cannot send an email, if they cannot send data on the disease itself, connectivity for us is a foundational part. And of course, it translates over to our clients who are landing here and traveling so far. Their first need, often along with shelter and food, of course, is connectivity. Those devices that they're using are such an important part of their diaspora. So again, this is what we did in West Africa. Those are all the data points of what we were building out of connectivity. This is a foundational part of how the UN tries to work better, what we call the cluster system, health, shelter. This is the emergency telecommunications cluster. So this is, again, NetHope is a part of that. They work with the World Food Program and other things. NetHope, I'm very proud of them. They respond out of somewhat altruism out of Silicon Valley, where Cisco and Microsoft, Esri, Google, Palantir, these are folks that all compete quite well, but when the lights go out in Georgia, there's a big disaster, they say, let's work together, and then we can get all the technology from these heavy lifting companies, in this case to 50 NGOs, whether it's Mercy Corps, other NGOs, World Vision, and that's, I think, a good model, and I think that's a good model as we move on from our discussion here. Mindful of your time, we've also been piling up data from colleagues that may be volunteers, and I think that's a call to action that we can have here as well. We may be piling up data from official sources, quasi-official sources, but what we're also looking at now, if we take static data from GIS, alerting is something we do for alerting and operation centers, but mirroring the modeling mantra that we can, as Peter Drucker says, the best way to see the future is to create it. We can look to that, and of course I've been involved, I was in Afghanistan a year ago with the UN, helping with, again, 600,000, what we call the R&R chapter, refugees, returnees, and we were making rather static maps. You see one of those over there, that's UN Habitat. So to me, it's a classic GIS problem, trying to figure out what's the best place. We knew where the avalanches happened, we knew the land tenure, we knew certain things about the lay of the land. What's the best place to make sure that these refugees who've been traveling for so long are welcome? So again, one thing that we can say about our experience here on Lesvos And throughout what we'll call the Eastern Mediterranean migrant crisis, and of course throughout the Mediterranean, is we can share lessons learned. I firmly believe what Vasilis had said as well, that we will not only collaborate in person, but we can do it virtually, and I think this really can be a laboratory for excellence. So that's my one call to action. This was an earthquake that hit Kos. I was there 2 months ago. We have this idea that we can also use artificial intelligence, simulating modeling, in this case flipping on 1 million servers at Amazon, and predicting where damage for earthquakes would happen. That often takes the UN 4 days with satellite mapping. Of course, in Haiti, where there were 250,000 people killed, in Haiti, we could have modeled what buildings would have shattered. You never have enough helicopters or search and rescue, fire, ambulance. If you knew where to send those before, and we do big exercises and training, much like an athlete, before the big game, you should train and exercise. But this is personal, and for me, I wear another hat, cultural heritage, and what we call this Royal Institution of Surveyors. We've seen heritage take a big hit, whether it's Syria. We did work in Mali when heritage was attacked. So again, heritage really matters to the culture, and again, this area of the Mediterranean is so vibrant, again, with Islamic culture, Christian culture, and again, we're so fortunate to have members of the clergy here, that this dialogue, it just could not be a better venue. So that's just some ideas. This is the Emergency Telecoms Cluster. We were working right after, we were in the midst of wrapping up Ebola, working on Nepal. I tend to be chasing disasters, and that's why I think academia can serve as such a good level set. How do we reflect on what we've done? And then this were some of the maps that we made as the Emergency Telecoms Cluster, NetHope. Again, it was something we will all learn from. In fast-moving crises, you're seeing this play out in a place called Puerto Rico, throughout the Caribbean, that all disasters can have similarities, but they're also different. So again, lessons learned. But this is what was happening and where telecommunications were being installed at that point. So again, that was kind of the old news, but I really believe these same groups, the call to action to get better connectivity in the camps here and to better serve the clientele, I think we can learn from what we did there. So that's kind of a look at what was done in that. It really does, of course, never let a crisis go to waste, I think was Bill Clinton's political mantra, which he had a few as well. But this idea that a change maker's lab and that we really want to do it in situ, but we often have 500 or 600 people on Skype groups when a disaster happens for the UN and NGOs. We can get civil society together. I was just at the TechFugees Summit in Paris, and we can also critique those folks who are often hacking aid, but they'll come up with 10 duplicative apps. I think standardization, Apostolos, your mantra yesterday, and again, your very thoughtful overview of, we need to be mindful of the stuff that does work, but also swallow the pills of the stuff that are difficult. And that really is the critique. I'll be the first. Beware of techies and hackers and NGOs. As we say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So we need to have a really healthy critique and a forum like this. So again, that's just a thought there. But again, this is how we work. And again, the Global Humanitarian Lab, Vasily has already reached out to them. They're in Geneva. I know they will want to come here. I think we could just, let's pick right off the bat, let's work on the heating in the camps. That's something, they deal a lot with shelter. So, let's start picking actual items that we can chip away at. Connectivity, let's chip away at that one as well. There's a lot of people that do that well. And of course, all the centers of excellence that are here. And the reason I mentioned let a crisis go to waste, as dismal as the situation is out of the political apathy that affected Puerto Rico, and it's a shame. AT&T is trying out new connectivity drones. Project Loon from Google are putting up balloons. So again, out of the vacuum of leadership and other things that we're seeing, there is innovation. So that's just another rallying cry. This is the idea that, this was the trajectory of, we used to pile up data but make pretty maps of old data. Remote sensing is a satellite revolution, and of course, UAVs as low altitude. Social media for emergency management, amazing lessons learned from Agder and elsewhere. You can get good insights, but I'll mention that, let's be frank, you can also wag the dog and have a very vibrant disinformation campaign with social media. So be careful of, not all technology is benevolent. Drones for good, and this idea that AI, but we need to now, and the Brits are weighing in as well, we need to make sure that AI is really critiquing, these algorithms are not omniscient, they're based on our own biases, and I think we need to have that dialogue. ITU's been good with that. I was on stage with the X Prize a few weeks ago. X Prize has been good about, we need to incentivize innovation, but we also really need civil society to weigh in, and to have philosophers and other folks here, I think really helps. Okay, so that's that. Again, the idea, this is summarizing, of course, there I was laughing that, for all of the benevolence of, this is the Digital Humanitarian Network, that all of these civil society and NGOs can help the UN innovate. I'm passionate about the idea of the UN, but it is as bureaucratic as any .gov, as any big business, as any academic situation. Again, you get 3 people together, you're going to have a bureaucracy. But this is the idea that also even in drones, we know drones can be used for bad. We need to critique their use. Technology is not a panacea. Again, I believe that Dr. Spanos really had the big picture of being critical, but also incentivizing. And this idea that we co-create and that we also are on-site, and I think we learn while we're here. I believe that's the summary. Of course, a nice picture of Norway, from whence a lot of our colleagues come. And thank you for this opportunity. Efaristo. Thank you. Thank you.